Hi Year 12, so this is lesson 2 on essay writing about Frankenstein and Handmaid's Tale for the prose unit of Edexcel A-Level English, and today the focus is essay planning. You're going to need a pen and some paper because I'm going to do a kind of introduction for you to essay planning and the unit and what it's marked out of, and then we're going to get stuck into doing an essay plan as I talk you through the process. And then at the end I'm going to ask you to practice that process again using 3 other essay topics. So before I start, I want to give you a caveat, and that is that there's more than one way to skin a cat, meaning there is of course more than one way to plan an essay and more than one way to write your essay up and to meet all of the assessment objectives and to get amazing marks. So just bear in mind as we go through all of these videos that this isn't hard and fast rules set in stone, and if you find ways that work better for you, then you need to go ahead and do that, particularly when it comes to essay planning. All right, so before we get into the meat and vegetables of planning an essay today, I wanted to remind you a little bit about this particular exam. So this is Unit 2 of Edexcel A-Level. The exam is 1 hour and 15 minutes long. When the specification first came out, the exam was only 1 hour. And they added the extra 15 minutes following feedback from candidates about how difficult it was to write in real depth and real breadth about 2 novels in just 1 hour. And that 15 minutes really benefits you. I'm recommending that you spend 10 minutes and 10 minutes only to plan, partly because even though they've lengthened the exam by 15 minutes, you get the marks for your essay writing. And so we're going to look at what planning you can do in a 10-minute time period. So in terms of the assessment objectives for Edexcel, this is marked for on AO1, AO2, AO3 and AO4. AO4 being the comparison AO. So AO1 and 2, which is your arguments and academic writing, and then your analysis of language, form and structure, are equally weighted and both marked out of 20. And then on a separate mark scheme, AO3, which is context, and AO4 are equally weighted and marked out of 20. And because we want to always think about how we can reach for the highest bands, the top level, the top level of the mark scheme, level 5, the phrase that's used, the descriptor there that's used to talk about students' writing is critical and evaluative. And I'm going to do a separate video on unpicking potentially what that means for you as we get into working out how we can improve our academic discourse. So just as a reminder, I was talking about in the last video about the importance of exploring interconnections and interconnectedness between the novels and the ideas in them. I was talking about the importance of having depth of understanding, but also breadth of knowledge about the texts, and then the importance of context. So we'll look at all of that as we come into our essay planning today. Okay, so the 4 topics that I want to look at, and we're going to focus on victims in society, which is number 1 for the purposes of planning, are these 4. So we're going to walk through a plan on victims in society, and then I'm going to send you off and you're going to plan on education and knowledge and violence and loneliness separately, to practice doing this process, getting quicker at it, getting more confident at it, working out where you can use parts of one plan with a little bit of a twist in a different essay, because we're often dealing with the importance of the same moments and characters. So you can get a piece of paper, you can do this as a mind map, you can do this as bullet points. I don't mind how you write your plan up. You can try out a whole bunch of different ways. You can do post-it notes. but we're going to start with victims in society. So this isn't the start of a plan, but this is really where we're going. So this is the end of our plan. And I think I come back to this slide at the end of the video. So this is, if we're thinking about the idea of victims in society, we have to end somewhere in our essay up with a lot of detail about what is the author saying about this topic, what is their purpose, what is their intention, what is their message to society about victims in society. And then, because we need to be critical and evaluative, we want to be able to show where this is best shown in the texts. And actually, out of our two writers, who does something particularly effectively, and where does the other writer do something slightly different particularly effectively? Okay, remember, this is where we're heading, so we're not writing anything down yet. We want to know, how is the message about victims in society crafted? How does that writer take their purpose and, like an artist does with a painting, shape and craft it into something that we can understand? And of course, that is our language structure and form. And then we want to think about why. Why has the writer got this message at this point in time for these readers? Why are they presenting this idea? And of course, this is our context. And then we think about that interconnectedness. Let's draw it all together. Okay, so we've got our juices flowing. Let's start the plan. So victims in society, get that down however you're doing it, in the middle of a mind map or whatever you want to do. All right, so step 1 and 2 are pretty much the same. We're going to start with Frankenstein and we're going to end with The Handmaid's Tale. Now, doesn't matter which one you start with. Excuse me. But for my class, because we've just finished reading The Handmaid's Tale, I want you to reverse back and deal with Frankenstein first. So I want you to mind map everything you can think of, and it doesn't need to be neat and tidy or anything like that at all. You're just going to write it down. Anything you can think of from Frankenstein that connects to the topic victims in society. And there are 3 ways you can do this. You can go through each section in chronological order, and I've got something on the next slide to help you with that. You can think about the key events. Remember, those events that we must speak about, that you couldn't write an essay about Frankenstein and pretend didn't happen. What are the key events in Frankenstein? How do they show victims in society? Then, thirdly, to make sure that you've got so much added to this mind map, you can think about characters. Which characters are victims in society? Teach us something about victims in society. So, we're looking at Frankenstein first, and I'm not going to read this out to you, so it may be that you want to pause the video here and really think about. So this is kind of a very notified, summarized chronology for you of Frankenstein. I want you to go through each of these events, and I want you to think about how do these things show us something about who the victims in society are, how they're treated, how they feel about themselves, how they react. So you are going to write down as much as you can about victims in society. Pause the video. When you're ready to start again, you can press play. Okay, so you've gone through the text in chronological order. Now you're going to think about the key events. How do they show victims in society? And you're going to think about characters. How do they show something about victims in society? And hopefully now that you've done all of those 3 things, we've not missed anything out for Frankenstein, and you're going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing for The Handmaid's Tale. So, just like I had a slide for you on Frankenstein, I've got a slide for you on The Handmaid's Tale. It's in much smaller font because actually The Handmaid's Tale is full of so many tiny little moments. So again, you're going to need to pause this video. You could even screenshot it if that's easier for you. And you're going to go through each of these events and ask yourselves, what does this tell us about victims in society? Okay, when you've done that, you're going to go think about, okay, all of these things happen in the Handmaid's Tale. What are the most important moments in this text? What are the moments that make the Handmaid's Tale the Handmaid's Tale? How did they show us something about victims in society? Then you're going to think about all the characters that we come across. Offred's mother, Moira. Offred's daughter, Luke. You could think about Off Warren or Janine. You could think about Off Glenn. You could think about the aunts. You could think about Nick. You could think about the commander and Serena Joy. There are so many characters. You could think about what's said in the historical notes and how that adds something to our ideas about the text. Now, in terms of the historical notes, you can't write about the Handmaid's Tale without writing about the historical notes. It's like leaving the frame of Frankenstein out and not revealing anything about Walton's story, or what happens after the end of Victor's narrative. And so those moments are so important at some point to deal with. So make sure you've got something added from the historical notes as well. So now you should have a page that's full of stuff. Page that's full of ideas, moments from the text, things that you know you're going to want to deal with. We need to kind of give them some structure. So you've mind mapped everything you can think of from Frankenstein and the Handmaid's Tale. Now you need a highlighter, and you are going to highlight the most powerful examples of the idea. Now you want to be really strict with yourself here, and you probably want to limit yourself to 2 or 3 only from Frankenstein and Handmaid's Tale. And then when you've done that, you're going to want to come back and choose the one most powerful thing that shows victims in society. Okay, so you're going to pause the video, highlight, really grapple. Is this a really powerful moment? Does this have a real truth? Is this going to create a real sense of reaction for the reader? Does it tell us something about who is victims in society or how people are victimized? Okay, when you've done that, get a different color highlighter, and you're going to do number 4 here, which is where you kind of do the opposite. So you've looked at the ones that you think are really important, most powerful presentations. Now you're going to do the ones that are interesting but not that important. And these are going to be ones that we do name check when we come to our essay writing. So this shows breadth of knowledge. So imagine you're writing a paragraph, and in a very rough sense it goes along the lines of Atwood shows that there are many victims in the regime in Gilead. And then you do a list, and this is your list of name check ones. These aren't the ones that you're going to explore in detail. These aren't the ones, so you could talk about the some of the minor things that we hear about. So the angel makers, the abortionists who are executed for crimes before the regime, the people who help on the underground female roads, the Jews who are repatriated to Israel. And you're listing, name-checking information from the Handmaid's Tale that supports your idea, shows breadth of knowledge. And then when you've done that, and then you go, but Atwood's most powerful presentation is, and you say something that worked from the one where you've chosen your most powerful. So this is keeping lots of this information that you've thought about, but you're just going to name check them in your essay to show you've got a really good understanding of the breadth of the novel, but you're not going to dig deeply and find those quotes and do analysis of them because you've got your powerful presentations to do that for. Okay, So you should have highlighted, and if you're using Word, then you can use the Word highlighter tool, 2 different sets of ideas. Now, you won't have highlighted everything on your page. That's totally fine. So you've got the things that are most powerful, and that's 3 maximum each for Handmaid's Tale and Frankenstein. The things then that you're going to go, that's interesting and it supports my ideas, but I'm going to just leave them to name check, and that's in a different colour, and we'll use those in our essay writing. All right, now you've got 2 important questions to think about, and this is where you're going to begin to think about your comparisons. So you've looked at this, you've got all of these examples from the text in front of you. Now you need to think, what is the author's purpose regarding the topic? What is each of them saying? What is Margaret Atwood saying about victims in society? What is Mary Shelley saying about victims in society? And remember, they're often not just saying one thing. Oh, women are most often the victims in society. Okay, they might be saying that, but authors are very rarely just saying one thing. They're also very rarely saying something in absolute black or white, in absolutes. Writers are all about shades and nuances and complexities. So when you begin to think about your purpose here, you don't just have to be writing one thing down. You need to be thinking about some of the complexities that are stated. Think about the passivity of some of the victims in both texts. Think about the social structures that mean people are victimized, the choices that are made. Okay. Number 6 then is where we begin to draw all of the threads together to create your comparisons, either your similarities or differences. And I'm going to talk that through for you a little bit and then ask you to do some kind of work on that as part of your plan. So what do I really mean by that? All right, so I'm going to give you an example from science. So say I was thinking about science and I've just done the mind map thing that we talked about, and I can see that on my Frankenstein, one of the things that I've written down is that science can be dangerous. And for the Handmaid's Tale, one of the things that I've written down is that science can be used as a tool to oppress. Now, on the face of it, those aren't exactly the same, but when you think about the ethics of science, both of those fall under the idea that we might consider that scientific experimentation should be subject to some ethical regulations. And so then I've drawn those 2 threads together, and I've used the idea of ethics to give me a kind of comparison. It's a similarity of sorts, but the presentation of that similarity is very different. And although we're not writing thesis statements today, I just wanted to give you an example of what that then may look like as a thesis statement. So I've said here, while Frankenstein, often considered the first science fiction novel, warns against the destructive potential of science, especially when it operates outside of an ethical framework, Atwood is more concerned about the use of science by the state to control a marginalized group. Okay, so you can see how I've said that they both fall under this kind of umbrella of ethics, but one of them is focusing on destructive potential, and the other one is focused on how it's used to control and oppress. All right, so let's make sure you're on the right page with where we are. So far you should have done your mind map, you've done your highlighting, you've added some ideas about the author's purpose, and you've begun to draw together your threads to create your comparisons. So you've begun to find some similarities or some areas of difference under the topic of victims in society. All right, well, you're not too far off the end now. Remember where we're headed. So where we're headed is What is the author's purpose? What are they saying about victims in society? How is that best shown? How is that message crafted, which is what we're about to get onto, language, structure and form. Why is the author presenting this message in this way? And that's your context. So the final two things that you need to do to add to your essay plan then is to, and I'm asking you to think about context first before you go ahead and find your quotations, is to consider the historical, social and biographical influences, context, that made these ideas come into life. So you need to be really precise and specific with your regards to your context. So examples would be then that you don't want to be saying things like, oh, you know, in 1800s in Europe, women had a really bad time. You do want to be adding something very specific about Mary Shelley or what was happening. You can talk about the Age of Enlightenment. You can talk about Georgian England. You can talk about Europe. You can talk about the influence of the French Revolution, all of those things. Obviously Romanticism as well. And then we've got some very specific context that bleeds into the Handmaid's Tale. So you've got the moral majority, you've got the Christian right, you've got the Reagan campaigns and the return to traditional family values. Then you've got all sorts of external international influences. So you've got the kind of references to oppression under Nazi Germany. We've talked about Romania already. We've got ideas from Islam in the Middle East. So there are all sorts of things there. So you're going to need to think about how you can interweave your context into some of the ideas that you've created. And then the last thing that you're going to do is find your quotations for your detailed AO2 analysis. And so that's where you go back to your most powerful examples from point number 3 here, and you're going to find the best quotations from those moments in the texts for you to really explore how the writer has crafted their message. And so you're going to want a quote or maybe 2 quotes from those sections that you can explore in detail, and we would then build that into paragraphs. All right, so you might need to pause the video again, get on and do some planning, add lots of detail, add some context, add your quotations in, make sure it's all ready to go. If you need to organise it in a slightly different way, now's the time to do that. And then press play again when you're ready. Okay, so spent quite a long time probably doing that first plan on victims in society. And that's fine, because the more you plan, the easier it will come. So we've got 3 other topics here, and I would like you to see how much you can get done in terms of planning in 10 minutes. So you're going to do education and knowledge for me, you're going to do violence, and then you're going to do loneliness. On the next 2 slides here, I have given you again the information about Frankenstein and Handmaid's Tale, so I'll just leave that running a little bit at the end of my video lesson so that you can screenshot them if you didn't get a chance to do that earlier on. Try and give yourself 10 minutes and see how far you get through this planning process, and again you can screenshot this now if you want to so that you can use it to help yourself later on. So see how far you can get through in 10 minutes with how many ideas. If you push yourself, can you get all the way through this? Even if you don't have as many different ideas from 1 and 2 written down, can you get all the way through 1 to 8 done in 10 minutes? Okay, so I'm going to leave the Frankenstein and the Handmaid's Tale summaries up for a couple of seconds. You are going to plan the next 3 essay topics, and obviously you're going to send them to me so that I can have a quick look at them, and we can share ideas. Our next lesson is going to be about writing introductions and getting into some of the technical writing aspects of this essay. So here is Frankenstein, and you can screenshot this page. And then this is the Handmaid's Tale, very, very, very long. And you can screenshot this page as well. And I'll see you next time for writing your introduction.